Alright, I'm pretty excited. Today I'm actually going to start working on the joinery for the Pallet Workbench. So let's get started.
Alright, so I got all my pieces laid out. There's two additional pieces that you see on the far right, the long thinner ones. So those are going to be the stringers that connect the two uprights together once I get those built. But right now what I'm doing is I'm laying out where I want those uprights to join to the bench, and I'm planning on doing through tenons that well, you'll see what it looks like if you're not familiar with the term, but woodworkers actually know the term. Not to say that I am one, but I've learned this terminology by watching a bunch of YouTube videos from talented woodworkers, not like me. But basically what it is I'm going to cut a smaller looking peg out of the main legs of the uprights, and those are going to go all the way through the workbench, and there'll be like a little lip that the actual weight of the bench gets carried on. So right now what I'm doing is I'm marking out equal lengths of where those tenons will be cut to. I'm trying to mark out equal lengths because I want the thing to be level once I'm done with it. So that's what I'm doing right here. And I get to really put my homemade crosscut sled through its paces here, and man, this ended up being such a time saver. So I'm getting the depth of the blade set, trying to be as precise as I possibly can because I want the same tenon thickness across all four legs. That's absolutely critical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting away the outside profile after I do one face, just to make sure that I'm happy with it. And you'll kind of see what this looks like. Alright, so that's one face. Now I'm going to go all the way around and do the same thing I did on that one face, all four faces. Alright, now that that's done, I'm going to break those little wedges of wood off, and that gives me the rough shape of the tenon, and that's what's going to go through the bench. Now I'm just kind of dragging it back and forth across the spinning blade just to kind of clean that up a little bit. It's still going to take a lot of hand work to get it fitted properly, but this is hogging off the worst parts of the material. Alright, that's the finished leg. So what we're trying to do here is clean up all the edges and get these things fitted to their final shape before I mark them out on the feet. What I want to do is I want to attach the feet and then the cross piece that's also going to help support the shelf. I want to get those fully assembled, glued, and dried before I start mounting these to the actual bench itself. So now that I got all four ends cleaned up, now I'm going to start marking out where they're going to go on the feet, and this piece of wood is going to be the feet. I think this is hickory, and I've got two like pieces, and I meant to book match them, but when I did the final assembly I rotated it wrong. But anyway, so I'm marking everything out, I'm finding center, and I'm working off of center lines, and that's what I'm working to. There's probably a better way to do this, a more precise way to do this, but I'm going with what I know, what I'm comfortable with. So now that I've got that set where I want it, and it's equidistant from all four edges, I'm going to mark out the other side. Make sure it fits, trace it out. If it's a little bit wider or a little bit off square in some places, I want this to be a custom fit, so I'm not really too worried about the shape of the tenon because I'm going to make the mortise hole fit it. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking a paddle bit and I'm drilling probably 3/4 of the way into the hole. Eventually I put a piece of tape on here to serve as a depth stop on the drill bit. Right now I'm feeling it, which is not the smartest thing. Once I get that done, then I drill through the other side, and that just helps to prevent the wood from tearing out. If you go all the way through, these paddle bits will just rip a giant hole out the other side, and I don't want to do that. So now I've got the piece of masking tape marking my depth so I don't have to continue to feel for that pointy end of the bit going through. Once you get that done, it's pretty easy. And while I'm doing a lot of the hand chiseling of the mortise and tenon joints, I figured I might as well get the stretchers and start putting some epoxy in some of these cracks and wormhole. I guess they're wormholes. They're probably more carpenter bee holes. But anyway, this is probably the part of the project, like I said, that's the most frustrating. So I don't really enjoy doing it, mainly because it just takes so much time. You have to keep checking it and checking it and checking it, especially with these deeper knot holes like this one that I'm filling right here. And again, I'm playing this back at 2,000% speed. So this is literally 20 times faster, or 2,000 times faster than real time. So it just gets sucked down in it. This is supposed to be a red, but it ended up being kind of a clear pink, an opaque pink. It looked pretty cool once it was finally done though. So now what I'm doing is I'm tracing out where the tenon is going to fit into this mortise, because I want to be slowly working my way toward these lines. And I do the best I can. These are the first through tenons I've ever attempted. So naturally I expect to mess these up and not get them perfect. I did practice on a couple of 2x4s and felt like I got it close enough. But still, when you know you've got 8 of these things to do, sometimes you go a little faster than you should. And I try to take my time. All told, I probably spent an hour on each one, and I still got carried away and ended up taking off too much and didn't make it perfect. But again, this is not perfect wood. This is really, really terrible wood to work with. It's not straight grain. There's all kind of weird knots and figure in it, which makes it look cool. But when you don't have the best tools, certainly don't have the best technique, it yields you less than perfect results. But again, end product, I'm super happy with how this turned out, especially given my skill level. So I'm trying not to blow out the backside, and I think on 3 out of the 4, I ended up going too far. Just that 1 or 2 extra hammer blows is always what does it. Once I do get at it from both sides, then I start trying to fit it up and do the final fit up with sanding blocks, because I don't want to take off too much. So I'm shaving off a little bit with the chisel, and then coming back with the sanding blocks, and I do the same thing on the tenon, just to try and hand fit these. I want a snug fit, but I don't want it so snug that it ends up blowing up the mortise. So now I got them all done, at least the feet. I'm trying to decide, do I want to go ahead and glue these on, or do I want to, because I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to keep these things square, because I don't really have all the necessary clamps to keep these things square. So I'm trying to figure out a way to keep those legs parallel to each other and then perpendicular to the feet. But before I start putting everything together, I'm going to add a 45-degree chamfer on the top edge of the feet, just to give it a nicer aesthetic and break up that hard line. It ended up looking really, really cool. So I got that done on both feet. So now I need to figure out, like I said, how am I going to keep the legs parallel to each other and perpendicular, perfectly square to the feet. But this is important as it is because I'm going to use lap joints for the cross braces. I don't want these pieces moving as I'm laying out my lines, so I decide to cut some 2x4 to perfect length that keeps the legs as square as possible, and then working to that. So measure out center on both the cross piece as well as where I want the center line of the cut to be on the legs, and then I just kind of trace it out. But I'm glad I took that extra step to cut those 2x4 spacers and clamp it so that those pieces wouldn't move. I would not have gotten it even anywhere close to square had I not done that. Still not 100% square, but it would have been worse, way worse. So I'm setting the depth on the blade. This is going to work very, very similarly to the mortise and tenon joint, except I'm going to basically remove half of it, and it's going to basically overlap the other piece. So I'll cut a matching notch on the leg. So that's how the lap joint works. I'm just cleaning up these faces with a chisel and a plane, and making sure that I get a nice snug fit. Again, I don't want to create any kind of stress cracks by having a fit that's too tight, but I want it to be snug. I want to have to actually pull it apart. Pretty pleased with how square this ended up being. It's not 100% perfect, but it's a lot closer than I thought. So now I can't help but test to see what this thing is going to look like, albeit upside down. So I put these are still not glued up. These are just dry fit at this point, and I'm kind of putting the stringers across. The stringers are going to be through tenons, same way that the feet were, but they're going to go through that lap joint. So before I do that, I got to glue these uprights up. And one thing I'm finding out about doing any kind of woodworking, you can never have too many clamps. You can never have enough clamps. I'm sure there's such a thing as too many clamps, but I am nowhere close to being in that territory just yet. But man, good clamps are expensive, which is why I don't have any of them. Now this foil you're seeing is I'm just trying to, I'm working on the actual bench top, and I don't want to get any glue drip out or squeeze out onto the bench. And I know the wood glue is not going to really stick very well to the foil, so that's all the foil's for. All right, so now I got those put together. Glue is dried. I'm cutting the tails off of the 3 tenons on the feet. I'll get it as leveled off as I possibly can with a plane and a sander. Any of those gaps I'm trying to fill with sawdust and wood glue. Again, I didn't end up getting as perfect a fit as I wanted to, which is why I did the feet first, because I knew I was going to have some issues. So if I was going to mess up, the idea was hopefully I'd learn on the feet and not repeat the same mistake on the bench top. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this particular video, episode number 6 of the Pallet Workbench. Join me on the next episode next week. I'm going to finish up building the base, which is going to include the stretchers and the shelf, which, oh my goodness, that was a pain in the backside to get on. But anyway, I had a lot of fun with this build, even though it took a lot longer than I ever anticipated this taking. So we will be getting back to bass guitar related content very, very soon once I finish up this shop. 2 more episodes to go to wrap up the Workbench series, then you'll start seeing the shop come together, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.